All right, so Ari Asulin, you are a software engineer, programmer. You are a composer, researcher. You studied at Arizona State University. You're a very well-researched individual. I've heard you on several podcasts, and I am absolutely thrilled to have you on. Thank you.
Much appreciated. Thanks for inviting me. And it's Asulin, but most people get it wrong, so it's totally fine.
Oh, yeah, I apologize. I'm not the best with pronunciations
No
and
way to
names.
know, really.
All right, man, where to start? So, I've listened to you, as I said, on a few different podcasts, and I mean, you seem to be very well researched on the electric universe, Tartaria. I love your Saturnian cosmology, how you explain that. I was kind of
Mm.
hoping maybe we could start with your idea, your reconstruction of the Earth timeline history, if that's
Oh,
okay with you.
absolutely. Absolutely, yeah. I'd love to. And I could just dive right in if you want, but
Yeah, that'd be
Yeah, let's
great.
go.
yeah. Well, I kind of just a little bit more about me. I really never expected to be into this stuff. It wasn't, say 10 years ago, much at all. I was just kind of surprised by the stuff I was seeing on Facebook. It was at the time Google Plus when it existed, and a couple other networks that just distributed all kinds of forbidden media. And there was so much of it, a lot of it was fake, some of it was real, but it was all very mind opening. And I never really expected that nobody would be able to solve it. Um, I've read these authors that came pretty close. Every time they always came up to the solution, but they never provide the full solution. They're too afraid of calling out essentially the powers that be. And I'm really no different. I'm following, in this community of literally millions of people who are trying to call out the powers that be and trying to determine who they are and so forth. But in the end, I think it wasn't about what faith you've put your time into, which theory and so forth. It's about, what does the solution look like? And because I'm a programmer, because I look at the world simply on functional terms, I feel like it was easy for me to sort of piece together some of these conspiracies and some of the ones that were controlled opposition, the ones that were fake, meant to um, fret us up instead of finding what we want. And it was all came down to functionality. For example, history class. If you're taking an American history class in high school, you'll know that it's taught in pieces. Now we're going to do the French Revolution. Now we're going to do the American Revolution. Now we're going to totally skip the Mexican Revolution and just um, teach it as if, and letting the students fill in the blank for themselves, that the human race is just prone to warfare and internal cataclysm. Um, but that's not a functional solution, is it? It's like even in games like in Risk and turn-based simulators, it's really hard to get the advantage for long. But, it's easy to lose it. Um, a numbers game when it comes to humans never really turns out, like the righteous win or the ones with the biggest numbers win or anything like that. It all comes down to the ideology of who's fighting. And it turns out that all of our wars, all of the human wars in history, we're not being told the reasons why they happened. And I mean, all of them. I mean, like World War II, we're not taught the reason. World War I, we're not taught the reason. We're given certain sort of triggers. But if they were to really tell us why these wars really happened, why they couldn't be stopped by the average person who didn't want them, then we would be able to stop three, right? We'd be able to stop them right now from doing exactly what they're trying to do. So I eventually realized that the solution to this problem is going to have to be including a little bit of calling out the powers that be, um, the ones that held on to our history, and to all of our facts. And what got me into all of this was just finding out that there was an alternate theory out there. It's been hidden from us our whole lives and been sort of flooded out by these other theories. So what are they? Well, we all know creationism, all about 6-day creation and God did it, and um, the Earth is only about 5,000 plus years, that kind of thing. Young Earth theory, versus uniformitarian theory, the one that they give us in school, based on anthropological history and the theory of carbon dating and Earth geography. And in that theory, the universe started with a big bang. They're just so sure that that's how it happened. 13.8 billion years ago, so sure about that number. And the Earth's age, 4.5 billion, so sure again. and we're just kind of left with this gap. It's like, well, which one do you believe in? And it just took me until 2012 to even hear that there was a third theory. Saturnian cosmology really bridges the gap between the religious and what scientists believe is the case, the secular version of essentially the creation story. So I don't know if you want me to share my screen, but I can sort of share some pictures and stuff. Sort of helps
Yeah, do it.
visualize. Yep.
Absolutely, yeah.
And please interrupt me if you got any questions, because I know there's just so much here. Oh, it says host disabled screen sharing.
That's
And then
not
sometimes,
good. Let me figure that out.
the problem exists on Linux as well.
How would I enable screen sharing?
Disable screen sharing. Sorry, I didn't mention earlier.
No, it's all right. I'm in the settings right now here.
Navigation menu, count management, count settings, meeting tab, under meeting, screen share.
Under meeting?
Yeah, in the meeting tab, apparently.
And Ari, which of the two worldviews do you subscribe to?
Well, once I figured out that Saturnian cosmology represents a functional approach, something where there's causality. You can explain one event leading to the next, why it happens. You explain it to a child. You don't need to have a physics theory, or, sorry, a certification, a doctorate, whatever. And frankly, almost everyone I've ever known who's really just sat down and listened to this stuff basically says the same thing I did without even understanding it as well as I believe I did. They say, wow, that makes a lot of sense. I mean, that's where all of our icons come from. That's where all of our stories come from. These unexplainable stories in mythology. And I imagine, just me, that without looking at it from a secular or scientific approach, that most people would rather just feel like they understand the truth, why they're here, their place in the universe, rather than this other version, this, Earth as a speck inside of a galaxy, inside of a million galaxies, completely theoretical approach. It's trying to describe our universe as lifeless and timeless, and we're so lucky to be here, and an asteroid's going to wipe us out someday. That's bleak. It's really bleak. A lot of people sort of ready to commit suicide over that kind of thing.
Do you see
And
if it's good now? I apologize, man.
oh yeah, sure.
I had to
Check it
go
out.
out of this meeting and then do it in my regular settings. I hope that worked.
Oh, it looks like it's going to work here.
Okay, cool.
Enable select window to zoom mediums. Oh, right, okay. And here we go.
Perfect.
Okay, so this is my website, paradigmthreat.net. And this article I've worked on for the last about 3 years straight is the chronology article, which started out as a small timeline of events, just dates. And then I started filling in the dates a little bit with information. And I realized, wait a second, I better do this right. So I started a timeline project. And it sort of spans from the very first memory creation to the golden age of Earth, the dark ages of Earth, which is a little different from what they teach in history class. The blip, which is entirely my theory, that 7th century BCE all the way till 10th century CE simply never occurred. And it's backed by Anatoly Fomenko's theory, he's made it very clear that at least the first 11th centuries are highly dubious and in question, might be thrown out one day. So from then on, modern history, which gets really complicated, just as you go along, modern history gets really complicated. But it's not so complicated that you can't find the causality of everything that's happening, like and explain it, like I said, to a kid. Say, oh, why are we still fighting wars today? Well, there's actually a couple of simple reasons. Won't get into just yet. But if you know the real history of Earth, it's really not so surprising why those would be the reasons or why we're still doing this now. Because a lot of this stuff simply hasn't been resolved. Religion hasn't been resolved. We got people fighting right now in the Middle East over an Abrahamic religion, which is the same religion for all of them and the same God and everything, and yet they're willing to kill each other. So there's got to be something wrong there. It's like, well, maybe it's mistranslation. Maybe somebody hijacked the holy text at some point and just set people up against each other somehow. I think so. I think that if you want to dominate the world, if you want to rule Earth, whoever you are, you need to sort of control the religious texts, the only actual records of human history that we have on this planet. They're all religious texts. So if you control that, you totally got the human race. And so it's exactly what I think happens.
I love this.
It-
This is definitely a lot. Could you go back a little though, whether go up or just kind of rephrase what you were
oh
saying?
yeah.
The era
I'm sorry.
that no, you're good.
I will go
I
on
just wanted
tangents a
you to
lot.
you're good. I just wanted you to touch on or maybe see more of
Yeah, I
the,
want to get
the time that was eliminated, the time that you
right.
said did not exist.
Absolutely. Let me get to that in a sec.
For
So,
sure.
have you guys covered the Tartarian Empire, the Rus Horde Empire, the Russian great empire that's been erased from history?
So I know I'm familiar with it. Me and Mike have talked about it, but never had a guest who really like in depth, specialized in it at all. So you'll be the
Exactly.
first.
Well, again, it's because I was willing to look at a couple things that are sort of forbidden right now. Russia is just totally forbidden. Anyone that's American knows, or British knows that we've been receiving constant Russophobia media our entire lives, and well before we were born. And that there's something weird about how the Russians have their own version of history and the rest of the world has theirs. And then in the 90s, when the USSR fell apart, they had first sponsored this guy, Anatoly Fomenko, to do a mathematical approach to history, just put all the text together on giant timelines and just try to compare the events and see if they really are unique events happening over 100,000 years of human anthropological history, or if somebody actually literally duplicated the events and pushed them back into different timelines. And they determined without a doubt that that's what happened, that somebody took the same event that happened in the same place, usually in Russia, and they changed the location, said, oh, that was in Palestine, that was in England and France. And who would do such a thing? Well, they're enemies. If you got an empire, you got a bunch of rebels throughout the world. You got the Protestants who are forming against this Russian empire, and I'll get to it soon. And they hate the empire so much that they name the locations differently. They name the people differently. They're villains and so forth. And at the end of the day, where we got to here with the Protestant version of history, all locations have been renamed, and nobody remembers this Russian Empire yet. This picture I'm showing here, you see neoclassic architecture. And let me pull this in a different tab here so I can zoom in. You can see that in all locations of the world, you'll find the same style neoclassic architecture. And by neoclassic, I mean sort of Roman style into this Freemason, whatever you want to call it, style that cannot be reproduced anymore today, not easily anyway. Everyone sort of agrees these structures were created by some unknown means, unknown until today. The last time these structures appeared was the late 19th century, early 20th century world fairs. And those world fairs, if you look up the official history, it was that these structures were built all over the world in the 19th century for the purposes of a fair and then taken down after the fair. That's the official history of these buildings. But just if you're willing to be open-minded about it, it's more likely these buildings existed since 15th century when they're most likely built. They exist all over the world. They're all the same for the most part, adapting some of the cultures that they subsumed into their empire at the time. But now that they're gone, the Russian Empire is gone. They left behind all this evidence that they certainly used to exist. We know the Romans didn't get that far. We know they didn't get to Tehran and they didn't get to Australia. So the Russian Empire did. And it's not just Anatoly Fomenko who suggests that human history might have been obfuscated and lied about, but actually a series of authors, a whole bunch of them. And one of the more popular ones, Immanuel Velikovsky, he's the one that wrote Worlds in Collision. That's in the 60s. He wrote a book that said all of the Old Testament stories that we heard, including the Exodus, these are stories of interplanetary cataclysm with the Earth, Mars, Venus, and the other planets too. And that the humans simply saw these events, wrote them down in texts, and then over time, the planets all left to the outer orbits, their final stable orbits, and nobody could understand the context of how these stories were possible. And they became mythology. They became misunderstood. So back to the timeline. The first thing that everyone in all civilizations on Earth remember is the Golden Age. And I say all civilizations. That's European with the Bible and the Quran, and then Eastern with the Tibetan books. With I have it all listed here. Yellow Emperor, in China, of Taoism. That's what I was trying to think of. And then in America, in Mesoamerica, with the Mayan first man mythology, and how the first man, uh, his body came apart to create all of the men and women that spawned on the earth. So the same thing in the Bible. The first man was Adam. It's just that we assume that Adam was, a human. But this story was redacted from the Southern Hemisphere version of it, where Adam was this towering figure in the sky. So let me describe that real quickly. The three plasmoids. In the late 90s, Anthony Pratt came up with this Pratt theory, where he discovered that Southern Hemisphere mythology constantly references the third man, this figure that that looks kind of like a guy with his arms up in the air, but sometimes it looks like a duck-shaped figure. But it's been carved over rocks a million times, like almost a million times throughout America and Southern America. So he said that must have been because the humans saw these three plasmoids in the southern hemisphere of the Earth in the early times of human emergence. And so his theory, which he does not buy into Saturnian cosmology, says this must have happened from some kind of comet or other event, which is fine. But with Saturnian cosmology, we have this complete theory. Let me grab the image here. I have an image there. In the 2000s, a character named Wallace Thornhill, British guy, came up with his theory of the collinear configuration being backed by plasma physics and electromagnetic physics. Where Velikovsky said he made all these claims in his 60s book, he ended the book saying, I have no idea why any of this happens. I don't know why planets would act that way. But here we're in the future, we know about plasma physics since the 90s. We've looked through the Hubble telescope, and we determined that the universe is almost 99% made of plasma. And that's the first state of matter, not water and air and earth. Those should actually be second, third, and fourth. It's mostly plasma, and that means it's mostly electromagnetic influences, pushing and pulling, because that's what electromagnetic energy does. And he came up with this collinear configuration, saying that the first phase of Earth's creation involved the brown dwarf Saturn connecting with the Earth's sun for the first time. And before that, Saturn was floating around the galaxy as a brown dwarf. It had Earth inside of it as a dead, lifeless rock, and it had a bunch of plasma on the outside, just sheaths of layered plasma. It's layered because it's different frequencies, different amplitudes. Just like the aurora borealis sort of shows up in layers. So this configuration occurred the moment Saturn and the sun became in close proximity, which occurred because Saturn is negatively charged, sun positively charged, and they're pulling on each other. It was inevitably going to happen. And it also occurred because the previous planets that existed in our solar system had died off and created room in our solar system for the rebirth cycle to occur. Again, very different from the way they teach us in school. I'll show you a quick video here. This I saw in a carnival, of all places. I did not see this, in a science, it just won't go full screen. So I'm gonna go here and go full screen.
I think I've seen, is that where there's an unknown object like siphoning plasma out of the sun?
Yeah, you tell me. What is that black thing right there?
Yeah.
Umbilical, right? Looks like an umbilical. I saw this in
100%.
I saw this in a carnival because those are the only people interested, apparently. NASA's not going to tell us about this stuff because they dismissed it completely when it came out, saying that this is nothing more than an angle, a weird angle that the camera happens to be in on Earth, our camera, showing one of these known tendrils sticking out of the sun, which again, they don't really tell us much about them, but apparently they're well known to NASA. And they're just sort of sticking out at us in a weird angle, causing the image of a sphere, like a planetoid, sort of sticking out of the sun. But we can also say, aside from their vague interpretation, which doesn't really add up, and you see things moving right there in front of it, so that doesn't add up. And the way it tears away from the sun like that, almost like a violent birth. And so when I first saw this, I looked up on Facebook, I saw a bunch of people, 2012, suggesting, oh, that's a planet being born. And I'm like, what do you mean? No one tells us about planets being born from suns. They're like, oh yeah, NASA lies. Like, oh, okay. Wow, mind blown. A lot of investigation I got to go through, obviously. it took me a lot of years to sort of start piecing all this together and find the actual theories, foundational theories that explain it all. And like I said, Wallace Thornhill, he's sort of like it was a big jackpot for me, because until him, most people mostly discuss mythology, comparable mythology. As convincing as that is, it's not very grounded in science. So yes, that's a planet being born. Happens all the time. And Wallace Thornhill will explain that in his model, planets basically, here's his model, form slowly within suns as the sun's interior, hydrogen, helium, fuse together to form even heavier elements they don't tell us about, which in the sunspots, if you look at the sunspots, they're black, just like the tendrils in that video were black. That's because the contrast we're using on our camera to see the sun is turned way down, so we can sort of see, without blinding ourselves. And all the stuff that's black is actually just a lot cooler. So the tendrils are cooler than the sun, and the black sunspots all over the sun are also cooler spots. And if you look closely at them, you'll see parts of the sun cooling and falling into the interior of the sun, which is also black, which is why those things show up black. So black interior of the sun means that the suns are hollow, just like planets are hollow and moons are hollow. And hollow Earth theory has been around for a long time, and I was well aware of that one before I found out about this stuff. But again, I didn't have any basis for hollow Earth theory. Wallace Thornhill explains it. These plasma sheaths basically cause opposing rings to form around all space objects that gather material into them, usually just water, but sometimes mass, and then sometimes they cool into shells. And all planets are made of shells. They're not just giant balls of molten lava or molten rock or anything like that spinning. That's not it at all internally. It's just shells spinning on their own, because shells that aren't attached to each other will spin interdependently. So back to the timeline. So Saturn and the sun connect and they explode, and Earth comes out, but also parts of Saturn rip into smaller balls that fall into space. Venus, Uranus, and Neptune. And missing a gas giant. And Jupiter, sorry, can't miss Jupiter. Wow. And because those 4 gas giants immediately formed, we now have our, oops, that was down here already. We now have our collinear configuration made of all the planets that we're going to eventually have. Here we go. So again, starting from the top, sun is where it is, it's fixed in place. Saturn is now connected to it and rotating around it, but we can't see the sun because the collinear configuration is sticking out directly away from normal line from the sun. So we see Saturn in the sky, and we see Jupiter behind Saturn, but we can't see Jupiter yet. And then in front of Saturn, let me get a better angle here. In front of Saturn, we see Venus, which is a plasma, and it's not a rock or anything, so it's making all these shapes, 8 stars, 3 stars, 2 stars. And in front of Venus at all times is Mars, nice big red shell of a planet of hard rock. It's always going to be Mars, Venus, and then behind it Saturn throughout the entire Golden Age, which lasts about 900 years, even though years last only 225 days in the Golden Age. The orbit is fast, and later on the planets break apart from each other, and the orbits start to slow. We get jumps on the calendar over and over, recorded throughout history, and every time they jump, they have to reset the months. We just only have like 7 or 8 months in the calendar. It used to start with March in the beginning of the year, and now we went all the way to a new month, January, named after the Roman Empire. So you can see that some of these months came much later in time. So moving along, any questions about the Golden Age? I didn't really talk much about it, but it's completely unique time. It's when all life was spawned, obviously, and it's not really clear to anyone exactly how that happened. A lot of the theories out there suggest that there must have been ancient aliens to spawn life, but the flaw in that theory, of course, is that at some point the aliens had to be spawned, right? So what creates life is the only question. And I do believe I do have an answer. Scalar energy, which seems to have a, sorry, I'm scrolling up and down here, but scalar energy is a form of energy they don't really tell us much about in physics class. I had to go into college to even hear about electromagnetic energy. And energy at scale, like giant energies coming out of planets, has a unique effect on energy at within it, small scale. The first effect is that whatever shape's forming in the sky or the planet forms on the ground over and over in cycles. It just sort of perpetuates at a smaller scale. And what we saw in the beginning of the Golden Age was the planets in the collinear configuration moving around violently. I think I have a video here somewhere. Moving around violently, affecting the Earth. And I get back to the video right here. It's a video I made a while back. I'm going to mute it. There's one part on it that actually shows David Talbot's animation from the 90s. And this animation really convinced me. So you see there's Mars in front of it. Okay, so Mars in front of Venus there. Sometimes Venus is a ball, and sometimes it takes other shapes. Let me go back a little bit here just to describe that. All right. So this is what they saw throughout the Golden Age, a giant ball in the sky. And that's why Baal, one of the first earliest gods, is named after Baal, or why Baal is named after Baal, however you want to do it, or why some people suggest that baseball is named after an old pagan god. It's because the first god ever seen was a ball in the sky. And you'll see a lot of similarities of simple words like that, as this progresses. The ball in the sky started to rotate because the Earth was rotating. The whole collinear configuration was. They saw night and day, and the Bible says, God separated night from the day and all that. First said, "Let there be light," and then they created the seas and all that, right? So these series of events are reflected in the Bible and all the other ancient texts too. That the Golden Age started out with a cataclysm. In Roman mythology and Greek, you got the god Kronos or Odin, I think, gobbling up his children in the mythology in both versions. And then the biggest son rips out of Kronos' belly, frees all the other gods. This is what happened in the collinear configuration. It started out as a very peaceful configuration, periodically interrupted by moments of extreme cataclysm. How about now? Can you hear me? I can't hear you is the problem.
Can you hear me now?
Okay, there you go. I can hear you.
My sound has been going in and out literally this whole time. I tried to text you, Mike, and
Yeah, I saw it on
sent
the
a
I saw the
message
message.
tried to text the group chat too. I can hear you guys now, but it's going in and out. I got the subtitles on though, so I'm following.
I was on mute. That's why you couldn't hear me, I think.
Do you think the recording was fine, or you think it's just between us?
I think the recording's fine because
Okay.
yeah, I'm pretty sure.
Recording because I've got the subtitles, and if you guys were going back and forth, which
Yeah.
where I couldn't hear it. I don't know what's
okay. It's okay.
Yeah, I'm recording on Zoom, and then I'm also recording on my interface, so it's redundant. So we should be all good.
Okay, so I think I can continue then.
Absolutely.
You
This
got
is
any
amazing,
questions,
by the way.
Thank you. Excellent. Good to hear. And yeah, please stop me if you have any questions. Let me get back to the capture.
If I stopped for every question, we would never get anywhere.
No, there's so much, right? I'm glad we started a little earlier.
The planet cataclysm event on the timeline? Like, how long ago is that? The
Good
Saturn.
question. All right, let me get out here. All right, so here's just a brief timeline there. The very first memory was 4,077 up to around 6,000, depending on which culture you look at. I have a list of dates up here somewhere.
So that was like the Genesis event.
Genesis event, let there be light, right? That first event, which the Westerners basically think is the first memory, and Southerners, including Africans, which their culture's just been destroyed, by the way, but they used to believe in that goes on much further back than the Golden Age, the before creation time, involving those three plasmoids, and they had their own version of it. Like I said, the first man theory. But the Westerners, Crusaders, Spanish Empire, so forth, did destroy most of that stuff. The British later, and in their version, the one we're taught, creation starts with God creating the earth and heavens and all that stuff right after creating light in 6 days, in 6 short days. So each day represents a long period of time, and throughout the Golden Age, essentially. And the first couple of days happened at the beginning of the Golden Age, where where essentially there's just a lot of cataclysms. Let me go to that Chronos picture just to sort of depict what I mean here. Okay, here's some paintings. A lot of people don't really understand these paintings aside from the fact that they're based on mythology, but they really do depict sort of the confusion and horror that these myths represent when the father births like 1,000 children and just gobbles them all up. It only could happen in physics, and it can only happen for natural physical reasons, not necessarily, humans can't be related to human stuff at all. So then the very beginning there, you see 3,147. This is actually, I'm sorry, this is after the Golden Age. So let me clarify here. The Golden Age ended with some major cataclysms. Everything just fell apart. What was great about the Golden Age, the abundance, and it was hard to die. It was really hard to be, injured and killed. Like they didn't know much about death back then, and or want of any kind, and and essentially just sort of ends with this flood. 3 separate events that the Earth gets flooded. The first one is when Earth is ejected from Saturn's plasma sheath and enters through it, and essentially gets in a great deluge, right? The first great deluge, which adds to all of our oceans here on Earth. Nobody knows where our oceans came from. It's not explained in geology, certainly not in a uniformitarian Earth theory that where the Earth forms over billions of years. You think all that water just seeps into the Earth at some point, and you don't know why it's salty. The oceans are consistently salty throughout the Earth without a salt source. Even if there was one salt source somewhere, you'd expect it to be non-uniform, but it's consistent. So why? Because Saturn's plasma had salt in it, and it has the exact same salt to water or hydrogen ratio as our ocean does. It's an exact match. Just one of those things that's just uncanny about this theory. That it does seem like the Earth passed through Saturn's outer shell at some point and absorbed all that water. Another thing that's uncanny, if you look at the tilts of the Earth, Earth is slightly tilted, gives us our seasons, and Mars is too, and Saturn is also, and so is Venus. And it's I think I got Venus wrong, but Earth, Mars, and Saturn all being on the exact same tilt is a statistical impossibility. That should not happen. So many people in so many fields should agree that that should just be impossible by chance. Coincidence on top of coincidence. But it would be explained if they all had the exact same spin axis at one point in the past before the cataclysm tore them apart and they kept their spin orbits. And that's why they match. So again, uncanny coincidences, which can be observed today, right now, show us that the creation of our planets is something entirely different from what they told us. And something has to explain these coincidences. So yeah, to answer your question, at the beginning of the Golden Age, there was some planetary cataclysm. And at the end, at the beginning of the Dark Ages, starting in 3,147, according to the Bible and Western sources, this one, basically, the Dark Ages, this event was remembered in the Bible as the Garden of Eden and the humanity being cast out of the Garden of Eden. We're told that it happened because we ate from the tree of knowledge. That was our fault. And without really understanding why anyone would say that, let's first look at the tree. The collinear configuration was also known as the tree of Yggdrasil, the giant world tree, which is just a big collinear tree, and you find this in mythology all the time. You'll find that like there's Middle Earth, right, in Lord of the Rings and a bunch of other ones, and it's never really explained. Middle of what? Where are you middle of? I used to think maybe Hollow Earth, but really it's all over our actual mythology, and certainly Norse mythology, which talks about each realm. Now each realm has a very specific condition. There's realm of fire, there's realm of ice, there's realm that you can't go to, there's realm that you can at the north, which is really pleasant. So very simply, the tree of Yggdrasil is the tree of life. It's the Tower of Babel. It's all of the mythology towers or trees that at some point came apart and formed everything that we know today. And you see that in Indian mythology as well. In the Western Bible, the tree of life was hidden because we ate from the tree of knowledge. The tree of knowledge was also known as Atlantis. Atlantis, let me get back to that one right here. I don't have any good pictures for Atlantis or any reference points at all, really, honestly. All I know is that Atlantis was in the most ideal locations during the Golden Age, where power of the clear configuration was so abundant and ever present that gems and emeralds were growing out of the ground, and it seemed like magical times, essentially. Technology was sort of just springing to life. It wasn't inventing itself, but I mean, you could grab an emerald and you can just meditate, and you can store a memory into it, and you can hand it to somebody else, and they can see the memory that you just had, stuff like that. That's really hard to account for these days in our conditions today. We don't have anything like that. We saw these stories later on, though. We saw them in the Mormon Bible, Book of Mormon. Joseph Smith has a playback device, some kind of ancient buried playback device that, while the Mormons end up believing it was a golden tablet, the initial versions of that story were that it was an emerald tablet, and that this definition is kind of lost on people in 19th century. But Joseph Smith had an emerald tablet that had a very specific function. It stored tons and tons of memory, unlimited actually. It used an infinitely indexed database, not software, not technology or anything that humans had to invent, just stuff we know about science. If you store a wave energy at a different frequency, you can store two waves together in the same broadband. And you can store energy in crystals that can stay there forever. You can store energy in capacitors and in watches inside quartz crystals, as long as there's an energy battery plugged into it. So we know these things about energy. We're not using it right now because the powers that be insisted on a digital format, which takes no advantage of any of this, and we're sort of kept in the dark. Thanks IBM and Microsoft for the monopoly. It's very, very effective. And we always assumed that monopolies and planned obsolescence and stuff were all simply profit-driven. But actually, this is more about suppressed technology, stuff that we've known about most of our human history, and then just sort of lost it in the last 2 centuries as a result of war. So back to Joseph Smith. There was something really interesting about his story. I'm jumping way ahead here, but he had a story from the ancient past when the Tower of Babel came apart, and Moroni, apparently this giant from Jerusalem, went to America way back then, and he just recorded all of his memories in these emerald tablets and left behind, or had somewhere in his workshop, the devices to listen. If you use these devices correctly, you can play back everything and keep it stored forever. But if you use these devices incorrectly, you literally pull the energy out of the crystal and it's gone. So Joseph Smith, having received nothing but these visions from spirits, apparently, or something, we don't know if that's true, but he found the tablets and he used them, and he's playing around with them, and he got visions from the tablets, which showed him very specifically a recording of a guy telling a story. Not the whole story itself. It wasn't that copy. It was just Moroni's story about ancient Tower of Babel coming apart, about how there wasn't Golden Age again. In the Mormon Bible, a lot of things reflect the Christian Bible, but it's an earlier copy of the Christian Bible. Christian Bible went through a lot of redaction, was converted from Cyrillic to Latin, changed many, many times. And I'll give you a quick example of what changed. So you got the Great Deluge, and then during the Dark Ages, you have all these pyramids springing up all over the planet. Definitely created by humans, not aliens or anything like that. The pyramids were easy to create because they're made of concrete. Historians seem to get this wrong. They get confused about concrete that that need to be invented in the 20th century, but it's been around forever, and it's a lot easier than building blocks and moving them in the water, and just you name it. Their theories are just not working out. But the concrete theory, which again Anatoly Fomenko supports, because his version of theory of pyramids includes all the pyramids, not just the ones in Egypt, and he knows that these pyramids existed all over the planet. Here we go. And even today, the ones they're still building, like in North Korea, that's a pyramid. It's the biggest pyramid on Earth. And the pyramids have a certain function. They're like a tower, like an energetic coalescing of energy tower. So why were the first pyramids built? Well, there was no way back then to just like enslave people, whip them, and make them build pyramids or anything. Not back then. So that's the scratch slaves. That's just mythology. Redaction from 19th century actual chain slavery, and just people also writing the holy text and mass distributing them in the 19th century and thinking that that's what slavery meant back then. But actually, in the pyramidal empire, the ancient Egyptian empire, I call it pyramidal because really it was all of the pyramids in Earth, and it was an empire of pyramids. Because they built them pyramids, they had an empire. It had a function. Like I said, it was able to coalesce energy, and you can talk from one pyramid to the other. You can communicate, which gave an empire an advantage no one could possibly, surpass. And they lasted throughout the Golden Age. They did all that Babylonian stuff that we've heard of. There's worshiping to Baal. Baal had disappeared and they didn't know where he went. So the priests started blaming, the people and saying it's our fault. We're the ones that did it. And we need to start sacrificing humans, animals, in order to get the fertility god back. Dionysus, whatnot. They were just looking for the crops to return, for the sun to return. Not the sun we know today, the old sun, the Saturn, the one that was up in the sky at all times of day, that was very comforting. It's hard for us to imagine something like that being there and then suddenly never seeing it again. So these guys turned to all kinds of really, evil conclusions, and it's made the church evil till this day. They've never gotten over it. They definitely think that humans are sinful and that all of the cataclysm we've ever received wasn't natural at all. It was all a result of various blasphemies that we've achieved throughout history. So pyramids throughout history, unmistakable sign of something. And they're all throughout the equator too. It's not like they're just everywhere. They were in places of high energy, actually where ley lines of electromagnetic influence cross, and you can still find those places today. Today they build like laboratories in there and stuff. If you go to those locations, compasses don't work. It's very interesting, but they don't tell us much about it. So all of our mythology is based on these moments. Definitely Greek. You got the cosmic thunderbolt, Jupiter shooting a giant lightning bolt which crosses the sky over a 2 or 3 days period, striking Venus. I put the oh shit there because it looks like that dragon Venus is really scared. But the cosmic thunderbolt, shows up in many different forms, and it's entirely a natural shape. Here's in this row here, these are natural plasmoids created in a lab, and down here these are artifacts found throughout history. So they saw these plasmoids, these natural plasmoids in the sky between planets, and they simply wrote it down. It's in all our mythology, like Fantasia and stuff. Those who know, they put the icons everywhere. It's their deep state internal religion to know this stuff, to keep us thinking that it's God so that they can play God. It's not very complicated to understand why they would hide this from us. The Narnia stuff is all about, how C.S. Lewis knew that Christian mythology is polytheistic, not monotheistic, based on the planets and based on our hidden history when, all this stuff was known. Also known as the Islamic Golden Age, about 800 years of really golden age of knowledge type times. Not the golden age I mentioned before, but just a scientific age where humans had already figured all this stuff out. Like I keep reiterating that in only the last 2 centuries was all this hidden and forbidden to us. And it's like I said, it's very easy that children can understand it. That's what C.S. Lewis was after, It's making sure that Christians don't lose this stuff entirely. He was well versed in it, being British influence. So yeah, pyramids are also stargates. That Stargate movie, they show us the pyramid and all that. They depict it completely wrong. It's not this little device in the ground, and it's not something that goes to the other side of the galaxy or universe. It just goes within proximity to the planet up there in the sky, Mars mostly, and you'll find pyramids on Mars. It doesn't go anywhere else because the energy that's discharging in the configurations isn't going anywhere outside of our solar system. It's all here, balancing itself out. So during these times, people could actually travel between the pyramids. This is again in all mythologies, Egyptian, in our Bible too. The Ark of the Covenant actually has that context within it, that it allows you to teleport to where God is and allows God to teleport to Earth, that kind of stuff. So they're just talking about human gods, priests that they worshipped at the time. Planet Venus has had, a dual history throughout mythology. Sometimes it's benevolent, beautiful princess, and other times it's Medusa with the many tendrils or eyes, whatever. And to look at the face of Venus is to turn to stone, because Venus at times caused cataclysm on Earth that caused a major electronic discharge that hit the Earth. And when electricity hits the ground, it can cause instantaneous petrification. Petrification, which they tell us takes millions of years, can be reproduced in the laboratory instantaneously with a big enough amplitude. So it's entirely possible that all the petrification that we're seeing around the world happened because of these discharges, these planet discharges. And the mythology, which otherwise cannot be explained, like Medusa or Lot. No, it's the other one.
Yeah, that's it. Lot's wife turning to stone.
Right, I was going to say, I have one right here. Sodom and Gomorrah. You know, those guys turned to stone. That was one interplanetary cataclysm with Mars. Mars aligned with Earth many times during the Dark Age, and over up until okay, so let me get to timeline. Sodom and Gomorrah is just a random event when Mars aligns and Mercury aligns on the other side of Earth, and all this energy passes through and destroys 5 cities of the plane, completely destroys these cities and petrifies people caught out in the plane. People didn't know what to make of it, but the priests, like I said, they insisted that there must be some reason that God destroyed that city. And so they looked at, you know, who were there at the city, and they say, well, they had some promiscuity in the city, and a lot of people like to just rape people and so forth. So it goes. Of course, it was the enemies of the people living there, the Westerners, talking about an Eastern city, that probably weren't telling the truth. So I don't know if these Westerners are even, you know, honest about that one aspect. Was there sodomism in Sodom and Gomorrah in those 2 cities? Probably not, you know, we don't know. But anyway, they couldn't figure out a reason why it was destroyed, and it just stuck for so long and became this term that means sin. It means every time this stuff happens, it's because God showed up and destroyed a town. And now go back to the priests and start praying to God and give up your ways. And that's the only solution that the priests are offering, you know, or God's not going to let you into heaven. You know, most of the time throughout human history, humans didn't believe in heaven or hell or listen to priests or go to churches or any of that stuff. Those churches usually had to stay underground, and the stuff they taught was so upsetting, and their sacrifices and stuff, circumcision and control over popular foods, you name it. It's just they were not popular. But in times of cataclysm, everyone runs back to the church and just says, "What has happened? Please, priest, tell me what has happened." And the priests take advantage, and they say, you know, oh, these were plagues. It must have been the Pharaoh's fault. You know, a lot of modern theologians, philosophers, definitely called these things into question. It wasn't just something we're doing now. Like Sigmund Freud, for example, definitely insisted that in his reading of the Old Testament, the Exodus story, which I read in Hebrew High Jewish school myself, basically could not have meant, if you look at it for what it's written, could not possibly meant that the people running the Egyptian empire in the Exodus story were also the slaves of the Exodus. Impossible. He said the Exodus was the upper class, the priest class, leaving Egypt, not the slaves. The slaves stayed in Egypt. That the story is all wrong if you look at the earlier versions of it. So the Exodus story was when in 1492, interesting date, right? Again, they don't tell us the dates for a reason. The comet Venus, it was in a comet shape, exploded out of Jupiter's belly through the eye of Jupiter, came right through it, and streaked across the sky on Earth. And the Earthlings thought, you know, this is going to be another cataclysm, and you know, they went to the priests, and the priests said, well, you know, we really couldn't predict this one. We have no idea why the Trinity triform God, which used to appear as in the sky, like I said, Jupiter, Saturn, Mars, and Venus, why it was one God in the past, why it would split into different planets in 1492. They couldn't explain that to the people, and the people are like, are you kidding me? You guys don't know why this was happening? And the Exodus, as a result, was because the priests had to leave their position of power in this pyramidal empire. Then no one would listen to them anymore because they couldn't predict the gods anymore. And that the gods were doing weird things, which made it really clear that the priests weren't their representatives. You know, I can go on all day about that. So the pyramidal empire, the Exodus, event was the end of that empire. 1492 was the end, and the people sort of left the authority. They definitely stayed in Egypt. The slaves are still there and stuff. They continue to have pharaohs into modern times, but the ruling class was gone. The deep state, the church class, whatever you want to call them, the Atlanteans, the ones who believed in monotheism, the ones who insisted that they have to follow 10 commandments and have a covenant with God and under circumcision. All those kinds of people had to go underground in the Exodus event again. Exodus, right? And in Asia, you got this dragon story about how after Venus streaked across the sky, the dragon regarded the sun. I mean, it's the sun in every painting. I know the mythology of Chinese is all redacted by the communist government, but the paintings really show the dragon regarding the sun. In this moment, Venus stops being a dragon and becomes a ball and finds its current orbit close to the sun, where it continues till today. Planets changing orbits suddenly and violently really shouldn't be that surprising in an electric universe. And that's because in an electric universe, we're applying electromagnetic theory, which is also applied in atomic theory. And in atomic theory, you got atoms that have electrons jumping state, and they jump state violently. They don't do it like gradually. The electrons will jump to a higher or lower state by absorbing or giving off energy in the surrounding environment, chemical reactions and heat and stuff. Planets do the exact same thing. So Venus, having gathered too much energy within Jupiter, pops out of Jupiter, becomes its own planet, and heads towards the sun, towards a positive energy source, and then gets to that next energetic layer, its orbit, which isn't an orbit so much as a layer, and just stops and gets stuck there. So that's what the Chinese remember, and I agree with them. That's what happened. And then something really interesting happened right after that. The Bible says that as Joshua was leading the Israelites from Egypt to Israel, which again, let me just say these locations were changed. Egypt originally meant anywhere in the Egyptian empire, which later meant Russia, because that was the biggest location for the biggest empire of the world. So Russia was an original name for Egypt, and the proof of that is in the Gypsies. Gypsies have the word Egypt in them, and they all come from Russia, or at least they come from the east. So this empire has been disappeared from history, and then there's these gypsies left over, right? It makes sense. So back to the Exodus story. One thing I'll mention, in the first version of the Exodus story, it's different from the version that we know today. The biggest difference is there's no Moses at all. And God speaks directly to the reader and says, I'm doing these things. I'm parting the sea. The sea is turning red, and then I'm separating it. And I'm hitting the earth with fire and brimstone. I'm doing it for this or that reason. The reasons were filled in by the priests, who did the best they could. The cataclysms were described as not really having had any particular cause. For example, the Red Sea parted on its own. God just decided to do it. It wasn't to drive people through it. That's a really cool story, right? But it's an embellishment added in modern times, in the 19th century, actually. Somebody added that whole thing about the Israelites going into the water and Moses and God parting the ocean. But the first version doesn't have that. And so, more to the point, the first version doesn't have Moses. And Moses, of course, is just Zeus, a redaction of the Old Testament savior, which only got the word Zeus because the Israelites, or the Jews, went through the Greek occupation, or not occupation, but they had their time in the Greek periods throughout the last 1,000 years. They absorbed about half of the Greek language into Hebrew and took a bunch of its mythology as well. So for this reason, Zeus became redacted into Moses. And then later on, when Christianity started becoming a rival for Judaism, or monotheism, the original name of Christ, which was Andre, or Andronicus in Latin, was also redacted into Jesus, or Jesus. But in Cyrillic, there was no J, there was no Z, there was no R. These letters didn't exist. So the original name could not have been Jesus. That name didn't show up for another 200 years. And it just happens to have the word Zeus in it. So it's kind of uncanny, right? So the first version of the Exodus story was just about Joshua. And if you know the Exodus story, he's the main character, really. He's there from the beginning. He's the one that's struggling with the Israelites under bondage. He's the one who throws the staff on. No, wait, that was Aaron, but he's the one that actually leads the Israelites from Egypt physically, and then he's the one that makes it to Israel. Moses never makes it to Israel. He gets stuck in the mountains because he pisses off God at the very last second by cursing. It's, ridiculous, but they couldn't really find an ending for this guy in the 4th version of the Exodus story when they're redacting it, and they don't have a grave anywhere or any reference in Jerusalem for Moses, or anywhere else on the planet for that matter, or in Egypt. So they had to do something about the fact that Moses is the main character of the story but doesn't appear in any references in the world. So they got really clever. If you watch the 10 Commandments movie, I love that movie. It's an awesome movie, but it's pure propaganda. And at one point, Moses is banished, by the Pharaoh. And the Pharaoh says, "And let it be written that we're striking Moses' name from all records, and we're cutting him out from all knowledge, and it will be as if he'd never existed." It's like, oh, great, way to keep good, book records there, Egyptian Empire. I mean, if that's really the story, then yeah, sure, of course Moses would disappear. And the only way that we'd know about him is through oral Torah and tradition. But, just looking at this more clearly, he wasn't in the original version. It was all about Joshua. And the weirdest things happened to Joshua, not Moses. In 1442, the sun stands still during a battle that Joshua is fighting in Israel, trying to conquer the lands. And also it's interesting in Joshua, I think 10:9 or something, God shows up to Joshua and says, "Hey, don't worry about this battle. I got you covered. I'll give you the advantage here." And he's like, "Oh, I don't know about that. What are you going to do for me?" And he's like, he lists 50 or so kings that he's already killed. And Joshua's like, "Oh, okay, fine." It's called Kings, I think. It's called Kings or it's called Joshua 10:9 Kings, something like that. The point is that there's a weird event that's remembered in Africa, in Middle East, where this character Joshua or Yeshua or Jesus, really, if you look at the letters J and S, had the sun stop for him in the middle of a battle. And the only reason why that would possibly happen is in that moment that the Venus encounters the sun, there's yet another dramatic discharge of energy as Venus has hit its final energetic balance level and just pushes energy back onto Earth and to the sun, just energy flowing in all directions. Energy that hits the sun, hits the Earth, forces it to turn its axis momentarily, even though it's spinning, in its tilt axis, which cannot change. We all know that poles cannot shift. All that material will just start shaking up if the Earth's pole or any poles would ever shift. But this happened for a moment, just enough for the sun to stop still for a matter of hours. And yes, sure enough, it followed with a bunch of cataclysm. The Earth was shaking and mountains shook and everything, all because Venus was dragging the Earth's north pole away from its natural anode connection point to the circuit of the solar system, and connecting it momentarily to Venus's southern cathode pole, which was, like I said, discharging. So there's really no other explanation for why the sun would appear to stop in the Earth's sky, and it never happened again. But it's in the Bible and certain other texts. And like I said, it's explained by Saturnian cosmology and Wallace Thornhill's model. Yeah, a lot of texts talk about this event when Venus became a comet and when all this discharge came out of the sun. And we'll get into that picture though. So yeah, cathode. I mentioned cathode. Obviously, the term cathedral came from the term cathode, and cathedrals are known as sanctuaries. We never really understood why. There were never sanctuaries in the Crusades, for example. Absolutely not. They were quite the opposite. So then when were they sanctuaries? Never. They were never sanctuaries to people against people in human affairs. But they absolutely were sanctuaries during the Mars discharges against the Earth, which happened after Venus's disappearance from the sky. Mars was still in the sky and still sort of electromagnetically connected to Earth through tendrils of electromagnetic power. It's sort of supported by matter, plasma, and just really hot materials holding the planets together, essentially invisible tendrils. And Mars wasn't ready to leave yet, so it was just going back and forth. And every time it came close, it would cause a discharge onto the Earth. The discharge was, in this case, it was lightning. With Venus, it was just all this weird stuff. It was fire and brimstone, people turning to stone. The the frogs and the locusts showing up and swarming, and all the cattle dying of diseases. But when Mars showed up, it was the opposite version. It was the anode. Now it's time for an anode. It was time for the opposite type of discharge onto the Earth's surface, which negative against negative was going to appear as lightning. And these constant lightning discharges against the entire Earth's surface are what formed most of our mountains that we know today, and a lot of canyons and other types of lightning scars. But also, if you look at Mars' surface, on its surface, because it was hitting itself back from that same energy, tremendous scars across of Mars. We're not really sure why that happened, aside from this theory, aside from electromagnetic discharge in Wallace Thornhill's model. In the uniformitarian model, they say ancient seas and stuff, but ancient seas wouldn't cause a line scar across the horizon, essentially, of Mars, and various other dendritic scarring. And I'll get into dendritic in a little bit. So one of the myths that this event caused was Prometheus, and Prometheus was the god who gave us the gifts that Zeus, Jupiter, used to have. They saw Zeus wielding that cosmic thunderbolt and hitting the dragon Venus, the Hydra. But suddenly Mars was hitting us with that cosmic thunderbolt at a much smaller scale, and over and over. It was killing many people on Earth. But every time it did that, the humans observed what to do about it. When it comes to electric storms, it's not like rain. You can't go into a cave, first of all. Caves don't work. Electricity goes right through the cave. Very scary. You can't go into high mountains, low mountains, valleys. Can't go into water. Can't go into trees. But if you start building rocks around locations, you'll notice the lightning strikes the rock, and it hits around the rock, creating sort of an electromagnetic field that charges itself, heating the rocks up, and never quite getting inside. This is known as a Faraday cage. Faraday cage, you can charge the outer metals, but inside you could put like a bird or something, and it won't be zapped, it won't be harmed at all, because it's within the electromagnetic field, within the balance of the Faraday cage. If you touch the cage, you'll get zapped, definitely. So
this is kind of what stone circles are, right?
The what?
Like megaliths, stone circles, dolmens, things like that.
Yeah, exactly. We see all kinds of shapes in the past. Some of them are beautiful, some of them are not, but all of them have this spire shape, right? It's always about the spire, and the pyramid again is a tower shape. And these shapes were made on purpose in desperation because the humans during 806 to 687 BC, it's only about 100 years, they had to keep building some kind of structure to prepare for that next storm, because Mars was still there. It was like going back, and they could see now is coming forward. It's like, oh, like meteorologists say within 1 month, Mars is going to hit us again. And they're called meteorologists, right, for a reason, because they predicted space weather with rocks and meteors long before the rocks and meteors went away, and now it's just rain and stuff, but it all does fit together. But yeah, 9 attempts between nine close encounters with Mars taught humans everything they needed to know about electricity, and gave humans the gift of the gods, which is just electricity. Poseidon's trident, which was originally held by Zeus, and then Poseidon got it, and then Prometheus gets it and gives it to humans. He's the only god that does anything like that, and he gets punished for it, right? In Greek mythology, how does he get punished? Gets chained to a rock, and albatross shows up every day and rips out his liver, eats it, and then he grows it back every day. That's the theory. I'm sorry, not theory, that's the myth. Well, Mars is the same shape as a liver, and humans back then would know that. They do surgery. So they're saying like the liver planet, Mars, all these words were closely connected back then. The liver planet seems to be torn apart by something, like a appearance of a bird or a giant electromagnetic field that's striking the planet. They're only going to think about anthropomorphic terms like birds and cattle and stuff. They don't know what else it could possibly be, They don't know about plasma. So they saw a bird tearing at Mars. They said Prometheus is being punished because he gave us that electricity. Why did they think the electricity was forbidden to them? Well, the priests had told them that for 1,000 years, over and over. Not allowed to know the language, not allowed to look at the holy texts, not allowed access to the crystals and the stuff that tells the priests exactly what happens. And they harbor all that stuff from the Atlantean days all the way till modern times, till right now, harboring it all up in these giant vaults and stuff. Like the Vatican they have these giant underground, miles-long vaults of nothing but collected artifacts from everywhere the British Empire and Spanish Empire were in the 19th century and late 18th, and the French before they fell. They took out everyone in World War Zero, 1912 war, World War I and II. They collect all these artifacts and just put them underground. Why else would they do this unless these are priests and Catholics, you know, people that we usually regard as dumb and unable to breed and stuff. It's like, well, that's just that layer of it. You know, you go deeper and you find out that these people still worship some of this stuff because they believe that they have a covenant with that first creator god, Saturn, known as El in the Hebrew Bible, that they made a long time ago, that El has given them this technology. And only El has, Saturn has authorized them to use it. And only they can authorize anyone else. And by technology, I mean language, I mean music, I mean currency, absolutely. You know, the minting of gold coins and all that technology, magnetism, life and death, knowledge of the afterlife, absolutely. You know, the common people are only allowed to know about heaven and hell, not allowed to know about reincarnation. It's forbidden. And I can go on all day. So we're still fighting this war now because those same people, those monotheist covenant types who believe that they're some kind of bloodline from mythical fake people like Abraham and King David, are holding on to this technology. And on top of them, and I mean on top of them, there's another layer even. There's a breakaway human civilization. We know where they are. We know who they are. They're right there on Mars. They used to be on Mars in the Golden Age. Mars was the best place to be, where Atlantis was. And when Mars broke away and Atlantis fell, and it fell into the North Pole of Mars, and it's also the North Pole of the Earth. All these, you know, ancient emerald buildings, just magnificent stuff that they know about and they found over and over, and they just zip it up. They don't let us see it. That stuff didn't kill all the humans on Mars. They're still there. They were a breakaway civilization. They lived on the inside of the planet when the outsider was receiving all this Prometheus-style cataclysm and was getting scarred. And there was yet another layer to Mars, another layer that constantly broke apart and hit the Earth. You might have seen it in that video I showed earlier, just this big red mass hitting the Earth. We find Mars rocks all over the planet. They're full of phosphorus and electromagnetic metals. During the cataclysms, Mars would pull that material back towards itself and leave Earth material here. People regard it as celestial material because it literally separated from Earth material. But it was just electromagnetic Mars just pulling itself back into that shell again. And like I said, that's where the myth comes from. It wasn't just a lightning scarring on Mars. It was also the entire outer shell of Mars being ripped apart and then healing, reforming every day. So where's that shell today? After the final encounter with Mars, it broke apart and could not reform and became our asteroid belt. Not a surprise, asteroid belt's right there, right outside of Mars in the next energy level. Any questions about this so far?
I want to know your thoughts on, since this timeline and, you know, perspective changes things massively.
Yeah.
What do you think of the Druids then? Where do they fit into this? What were they really? And what if some of the years are missing? Was there no Roman Empire versus like the Druids and that type of deal?
Yeah. So I can get into modern times because clearly you can see that there was this cataclysm and it shaped things in an unforgettable way, but then we sort of forgot later. So what happens? So the first basis for why I would claim that there would be a blip that would span such a long period, when I haven't seen anyone else claim this yet, is I am basing it on Fomenko's claim called the phantom time hypothesis.
Right.
You might have heard this theory by many other people too, but
Sure.
in most people's versions of it, it's only about 200 years or 300 years. And maybe it's enough to say, well, that's the whole Roman Empire, and so the Roman Empire never existed. But Fomenko goes so much further, and he's a Russian, and he had all this text from the Kremlin that no one else could see. And he's atheist, by the way, and he's very secular. And the USSR didn't like what he was doing, and they didn't give him access to 19th or 20th century material at all. So he used what he could. And he said, look, there's a 1,000-year gap. And not only am I sure about this by comparing timelines, but I also know exactly how they did it. It's a very simple explanation for the oh, that's an ugly thing. I'm not going to show that. It's a very simple explanation for why there's 1,000 years specifically for the gap. Here's a picture of Fomenko. He's just a big nerd from USSR in the 90s. We're competing big time with the USSR in the 20th century, and they kept beating us, and we kept lying. It's shameful. I like being American for a lot of reasons, but we have a lot of lies we got to work through. Space race was a big lie, Apollo missions, and all that, and we sort of just had to beat the Russians, at what they did. What they do, well, they put humans into space, which is really freaking hard to do. It's dangerous, and we had to say no. We can go all the way to the moon, and the moon is way far out there beyond the Van Allen belt. It's out there in, outside of Earth's magnetic field. A lot of Russians and people at the time did not believe that the moon was that far away and that humans could leave the Earth. They didn't think that. But the Westerners were so sure of it that we did that moon mission. And I'm jumping ahead, but it's interesting stuff. The Apollo missions were started all the way up to the point when, the theory goes, they were canceled and told, and the pilots were told to go along with the cancellation because of the need for Americans to beat the Russians in a technological race during nuclear war, Cold War times. So apparently, and this is the only theory I believe, so that's why I'm even mentioning it, this really adds up for a lot of reasons, because you can't leave the Van Allen belts. There's so many reasons why you can't. And the Russians tried to, and they sent a woman up there and a monkey, and you get close to the Van Allen belts and you just die. The Earth keeps you alive, and you can't leave it for that reason. So, so we've been lying about the Russians for a long time, and we lied about Fomenko when he came up with his claim. We just sort of ignored it, and at all levels of secular, religious, mathematical, and definitely historian. And he called out our history big time. He said, "Look, you guys realize that you're just following this one guy, Scaliger, Joseph Scaliger. You realize that he was a priest involved with the Catholics' version of history. I mean, do you realize that everything we teach in school about Columbus and ancient Egypt and stuff came from the Catholic Church?" A lot of people just don't realize this, and he's trying to get people to at least understand that we don't have a lot of references for Western history. We just have that one Scaligerian copy, mass-produced and mass-taught. And it's not even the version that Scaliger wrote. He even points out that we're mass-producing a 4th edition of a book that he wrote, the first edition of, that had been heavily redacted. We don't even know who did it. He suggests a person that he thinks did it, but he doesn't know why that person would screw up Scaliger's version of history so much. And he's trying to explain to the Westerners that they have to fix their history, the last 1,000 years of their history, because they have everything wrong. And every country has their own version of history to a little bit. When it comes to the royalty, when it comes to kings and queens, how they're all intermarried and how English royalty has a bunch of Russian blood, they're just completely in denial about it in every country. They don't want to admit to that stuff. They have a bunch of bad blood. They fought a bunch of wars, and they're just done with that topic. So you can kind of see when Fomenko's making these claims, he's getting nowhere. No one's listening to him, and we just automatically ignored him, and he just went away. So he wrote a bunch of books, published a bunch of videos, and just endlessly, did a bunch of research on it. He's still alive. No one really cares about it, but he makes this claim that the 1,000 years was added almost by accident. The first version of the Bible, Cyrillic Bible, written by this Russian Tartarian Rus Horde Empire, right after the crucifixion, and I'll get to that in a second, did not say in the year 1300 AD. And Anno Domini means in the year of our Lord, which doesn't mean God. It means the most recent savior, the sun. Everyone was a pagan sun worshiper since the sun showed up for about 1,000 years now. This has been a sun worshiping planet. But a lot of people started to redefine the words sun into the word son, son of God. And as these Spanish conquistadors are killing Mayans and Aztecs and knocking them over the head and saying, you don't worship the sun, you worship the son of God. They didn't know better, and they didn't know what was being done to their language. And now these words are forgotten. But like I said, for a long time, it was all about the sun. And Fomenko simply points out that in the year of our Lord was Anno Domini, starting with year 0. The only reason that year 0 started was because, well, actually, Fomenko doesn't point this part out. He doesn't say why it started, but he says that it was not a 1. It was just a letter for Lord, for the sun. And so every year that's 1380 AD is actually 380 AD. That's his claim. The mistake came from the Protestants. The Protestant Western Reformation was not a protest movement against the Catholic Church, which itself has no reference point for ever having existed, just like the Roman Empire. No proof that it was ever there. Instead, you have this Russian Empire, this Greek Orthodox Church that was redacted into the Catholic Church that we know today, redacted by purging, by fire, by warfare. It's called the Catholic Church for a reason because they Catharized everyone, all of the Christians, in this great period of sacrifice during the Crusades. You can look up the Cathars. This was a Christian movement in southern France that was literally burned at the stake by the thousands because they refused to renounce their Western Russian religion ideology by the Catholic Church. And that's not the only thing the Catholic Church has done that's evil, by the way. So I'm just making the point that the Catholic Church never came into existence on its own. It simply stole everything from the Russian Greek Orthodox Church, even the fact that the Protestants were protesting against Russia, even that. And so people think it's between France and England. But he makes it very clear now, those Western Protestants, they're so mad at how this Russian Empire came into existence. So let me get right into that. That all happened in the 11th century. That's when Mars stops attacking us. There's a bunch of cathedrals all over the place. There's a lot of priests and stuff, but they're of all kinds of religions. It's all very eclectic and syncretic, which means there's no fighting between religion yet, and there's no usury, there's no slavery, it's just a nice time to be alive on Earth. It's not the golden age, but you got high technology. You see all these cities built in Spain and stuff. They're built like circuit boards. Like they knew how to channel energy in the rivers, and they had free energy and free abundance of food and all that ever since the sun showed up, honestly, because all of those Jesus myths came directly from the sun showing up suddenly, walking on water, calming the storms, providing abundant food, turning water to wine with grapes, healing the lepers. I can go on all day. All of this is from the sun essentially in the 10th century. So 10th century, 11th century, nothing really happens. Bunch of humans spreading out, building cities. There's no war yet. In the 11th, the year of the Lord deception, he thinks it's actually 1,053 years that have been shifted forward by the Jesuits specifically. So how they do it, when those Jesuit Catholics, when they went all over the world and started pushing the Protestant version of Catholicism, in an attempt to contain the Russian Empire, because they were against it, they were fighting it. They had the military wing, for example, Jesuits had a military wing. They're planning incursions and missions and all kinds of stuff. And so their version of the history that they, when they conquered people, when they went to Africa or Sri Lanka and just like conquered people and gave them a new religion, redacted the one that they had, they said they refused to admit that the character, I jumped ahead, but the character that that created the Russian Empire, Christ, even existed. They refused to name him. The event that caused the crucifixion and then the Crusades, which again, according to Fomenko, happened right after the crucifixion, in revenge of the crucifixion, within 10 years and not 1,000 years later, which makes no sense. That revenge crusade and all of the events that followed it created the Russian Empire and all of the events, all of the modern events in place as well. But the Protestants, the ones who were losing in that event, refused to even name the first Tsar of the Russian Empire, Christ, and so they gave him the letter iota. And every time they talked about him, they said, "He who will not be named," or iota. This is not something that just Fomenko says. You can actually go look it up. That the Catholic Church, for the first 200 years of the Christian Church, refused to name Jesus or Christ or any of those names and called him iota because they didn't like him. They didn't like Christ for the first 200 years. So who is this early Catholic Church? The monotheists, like I said, the sun replaces Mars. And then in Jerusalem, which is in Istanbul, not in Palestine, it was the most holy city on earth. It was the biggest cathedral. It was designed with 3 gates, just like that giant castle in Lord of the Rings with 3 gates, for the purposes of modeling the kingdom of heaven. This is where we get 666 from. It's 6 gates and 3 walls. been a while since I went over this. So 3 giant walls and 6 gates. They saw this in heaven in the first place. They saw the Star of David appearing in the front of Saturn in the Golden Age, and they said that's the kingdom of heaven. That's heaven up there. And I see 6 gates and 3 walls within the star. So the point is that these the first model of Jerusalem did actually copy that model and look like this. Currently, it looks like a mosque and doesn't look anything like this anymore. But what it was a location where the monotheists were convincing everyone that that their version of history, the unpopular underground version of history, they're trying to bring it back out again. They said cataclysm's over and we can all worship the sun, which is fine, but just as long as you accept that the sun up there in the sky is a son of God, the Old Testament god Saturn. And the people are like, where's Saturn? And they're like, I don't know, he disappeared, he's invisible now. They're like, well, I'm not going to believe in your invisible religion. And it really just did not work for a long time. Today we believe in invisible gods, but in the polytheistic days, they saw the gods up in the sky. There was no reason for anyone to believe in anything invisible. So when these Istanbul monotheists in the 11th century were trying to convince everyone they could to worship an invisible god that no longer appears as the bigger god of the one that is visible, that they all do worship, just because they're trying to get them to follow the 10 Commandments. That's all it is. The first commandment says, you should do not worship other gods before me. The flaw, of course, of that first commandment is that God mentions the other gods, like right there, the Old Testament God admits that there are other gods. He's just being insecure. And finally, you can just say, well, that wasn't really God speaking anyway, because plants don't speak to humans. That was just the priest in the Golden Age just trying to determine why all the bad stuff happened and suggesting that we all need to follow a set of commandments in order to not piss off God anymore, so there won't be any more cataclysms. And so these guys trying to get everyone to do the first commandment, much less the other 10, the other 9, is very difficult, and they're not getting anywhere. And then they have a second agenda here. The reason why they built all these walls, because these walls aren't helping with the cataclysms, why they had all these towns built in them. They said, don't worry, you're in the holy castle. God's not going to destroy you like he did, 50 years ago in Sodom and Gomorrah. The reason people moved here and believed in them was simply because they were starting to share all of their deep state Atlantean knowledge. Like, okay, we're going to let you learn a language, ancient, Hebrew or Aramaic, actually, it was called. And I'll get to these pictures in a sec. And the other issue was they built the high walls, right? They look like, if you look at the walls, they look like defensive walls, actually, for the first time ever. Humans never built walls like this, not in the pyramids, not ever. So that they were building these walls is significant. They had a secondary agenda. They knew that there was an entire race of humans out there that will never, ever accept their religion. They're not stupid, and they know this by doing missions and surveillance. They are the deep state after all. They have all the technology. It's not advanced technology. It's just carrier pigeons and I don't know telepaths and stuff. But they built the walls because they know that they have to get rid of the giants. These are the human giants, whole race of giants which existed since the Golden Age. They're plentifully referenced in the olive Bibles, Western, Mormon, all of them. And in Russian mythology, Christ is not a magical figure of any kind, much less the Son of God, much less a descendant of King David. They don't even believe in King David, that he ever existed, and there was no bloodline like that. Christ was just a Russian. He was one of them. That's what they say, and that enough is so blasphemous that their own Greek Orthodox Church will not admit to it. They're not willing to piss off the Westerners on that one at all. But the Russian literature is abundant, and Fomenko points all these stories out and says, look, what happened was this guy Christ went to Istanbul. Him and his mother, Mary. And the story is weird, where Mary gave birth to him in a stable. You gotta look at the story and try to decipher what it means. Westerners couldn't do it, and it's still sort of a religion full of contradictions. But in the Russian version, Mary is not just a regular human like you and me that would actually be kicked out of a hotel. She's a giant, and she actually has the depiction of being a giant in many paintings and in literature. Harry Mary is the name of this one France exhibit, which showed a bunch of pictures of her with body hair all over her. So that doesn't alone prove that she was a giant, although you do see smaller people around her often. But the same thing is true about Christ. He's depicted over and over as this giant, hairy stag or Sasquatch or whatever name you want to choose. And the reason why he enters the story at all in a place that is trying to eradicate giants, building high walls and planning for warfare, trying to conscript humans into armies. They're not willing and they don't want to fight giants. Slow and go process. What they do is they say, okay, you know what? Something weird happened. We were doing a census of the region that appears in the New Testament, a census, and the giants were fleeing the census. In Western version, they were coming to the census. Contradiction again, makes no sense. Why would a pregnant woman be forced to travel just to make a census? You know, is there no absentee way of recording her existence? It just does make no sense in the Bible as it exists today. But in the Western version, where censuses are, or sorry, Eastern, where censuses are usually regarded as scary, dangerous things that bad people do, which I agree with too. During the Great Depression of the 40s, no, sorry, the 30s in America, they could not get a census that year because of how much Americans distrusted their government that year for causing that Great Depression. So it's throughout history, people hate censuses. And during the New Testament, Mary was running away from it, no doubt. They were counting all the giants in the region. They were preparing armies to go out there and slaughter them. They just had to know what the count was and how to commission the soldiers. So as they were fleeing, she couldn't flee anymore. She got stranded in a village in the Crimea. That's the location where the humans, average-sized humans, our size, took pity on her, which is not really all that surprising. Not everyone agreed with the agenda back then, but not only did they take pity, they convinced the invading soldiers to also not slaughter her and not kill the baby that she was about to give. So Mary, she was in pain, she's on the ground, they didn't know what to do about it, so they gave her a cesarean. Again, in Russian version, Christ was born of cesarean section, which fills in a bunch of other contradictions and myths as well. The Holy Grail, the cup used to contain the blood that was spilling out of Mary during the cesarean, because it's very messy. The spear of destiny, the Holy Spear, with blood on it from Jesus. That again was used to carve the cesarean section on Mary, and had Jesus and Mary's blood on it, and it became a holy relic later. These things were just stored in castles and stuff for hundreds of years, and then as Christianity became so popular, everyone was like, where is the Grail? Where is the Holy Spear? They're real things, and they had simple explanations. Another one is that Julius Caesar and Alexander and Muhammad, they all seem to have these weird coincidences in their lives that totally line up. They do the same things the same year of their lives and then die at the same age. These coincidences can also be explained, and Fomenko does explain these things as duplications and redactions of the same story, written down by different people at different times on different sides of the fight. It's really not that surprising that the Russians would have a version, the people they're fighting and conquering would have a version, and then the enemies that would eventually conquer them would also have a version of Christianity. That they're all going to be different. So in the Russian version, this one character, Andronicus Christ, creates an empire. And he doesn't do it just by, okay, I'm going to go do this empire now. It's entirely by causality, which is why I'm into these stories, why I'm into this investigation. Everything that's happening makes sense. The first thing that happens is, here's some Bibles, by the way. The giants had their own religions, their own books. Most of the old books that were written in ancient times were written by giants. They used to live to be 300 years old.
Wow,
They
those
were
are huge books.
Right. They were around long enough to actually learn languages, come up with them, and know things and want to write them down. It makes a lot of sense why giants would be the first book writers, and why later on average-sized humans would redact their books into a different language entirely, Latin, and change the story significantly so that there's no giants anymore, and the version we have today. So
Hey,
deep
Ari?
state. Yeah, good.
Sorry to interrupt you. We
Yeah.
usually try to go like an hour and a half or so.
Right,
Do
right.
you, we would love to have you back, dude, to kind of pick up maybe like where you were to
Yeah,
bring it to modern times.
that's fine.
Is that all right? I apologize. I probably should have told you ahead of time
No, no, I'm
because
actually right at the halfway point. So if you want to continue from
perfect.
here next time, then I'm totally on board.
Yeah, yeah. Do you think that's a good way to wrap it up right there? Or did you want to put like a little stamp on it?
Yeah, I totally finished ancient history, and now we're gonna get into modern history, starting with Christianity and the Rus Horde Empire, the Tartarian Empire, and all that stuff that's been deleted and redacted from history.
We could get you back like ASAP too. When would you be down to do a part 2?
Anytime is fine, except I got another podcast on Friday, so any other day is fine.
Okay. Are you down tomorrow?
Yeah, yeah, I can do tomorrow.
Does
Yeah.
that work for you, Tom? Tomorrow night?
We could probably go right around the same time.
Was that all
Excellent.
right with you?
Yeah, yeah,
All
that
right.
sounds like fun.
We'll pick
That's
up with the
awesome. Yeah,
giants.
that's perfect, dude. All right.
Awesome.
Well, thank you so much, Arya. We look forward to doing this again tomorrow.
That was a lot.
bet.
That was a
Yeah,
lot. I love
It's
it,
a lot of
though.
fun. I'm sure you guys will have more questions and stuff next time.
Yeah, it'll be.
Oh
able to-
yeah, yeah. I just love letting you go because I'm learning so much. I'm literally writing things down here. I have
Oh, excellent,
Thornhill's
excellent.
name, Scalinger. I'm just taking notes so I could go.
Excellent. Yeah, I should probably tell you how to type that one. But yeah, nice.
A lot of things making sense, actually.
Yeah,
Great.
good to hear. Yeah, it does make sense to me too.
Good stuff, man.
See you tomorrow, brother.
All right, see you guys later.
Beautiful. Later.
Bye.